Straightedge. This time, we'll make this beautiful Bubingo veneer coffee table with ebony inlay.
Cut! What are you doing? This is my show.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Brian Havens, and welcome to the Straightedge. This time, we'll learn how to do some router inlay, so stick around. Router inlay is a fantastic way to embellish your work, taking the ordinary to extraordinary. It's done entirely with a router. It has its limitations, but you'd be surprised just how far you can go with router inlay. Now, the first time I looked at router inlay and thought about doing it, I was intimidated. After all, something that looks that nice must be difficult, right? Turned out it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. On the other hand, I found out while making this video that there's quite a bit to talk about, so there was no way I could cram it all into one short video. This time, we'll focus on the essential skills that we can build on. Let's get started. Let's go over the tools and materials that we'll need to do router inlay. Of course, being router inlay, we'll need a router, preferably a plunge router. It's possible to do router inlay without a plunge router, but it's highly recommended. A router inlay kit, we'll talk about this in a minute. A piece of scrap sheet material, my favorite is MDF, but anything with a smooth surface will work. A router template, you can either buy one from a store or you can make your own. For this video, avoid shapes with corners. Stick with something like an oval or a circle. If you have a large Forstner bit or a hole saw, you can also make a quick circle template by cutting a hole into some 1/4 inch stock. MDF or masonite, also known as hardboard, is ideal. A piece of stock for the workpiece. This is the part of the project that the inlay will go on. Maybe it's the top of a box, a shelf, or the top of a table. Some 1/8 inch thick stock of various species. This is the material that we'll use to make the actual inlay. You can buy it at a local supplier, or you can resaw it on the bandsaw. If you're new to resawing on the bandsaw, or if you've been having trouble, don't forget to compensate for bandsaw blade drift. For information on how to do this, see my video on compensating for bandsaw blade drift. Some double-sided tape. Be careful if you decide to use Turner's tape. Turner's tape is okay for use on woods like maple that are tight-grained, but they tend to pull out the fibers when removing it on woods like walnut. I usually stick to a light-duty double-sided carpet tape. And finally, some wax paper. We'll use this to keep the glue from getting on the caul when we clamp the inlay. For more information about the tools and materials needed to do router inlay, check out the notes for this video on my website. Now let's take a look at the anatomy of a router inlay. A router inlay is composed of two parts. There's the positive, which we'll cut out of the 1/8 inch stock, and the negative. The negative actually starts out as a part of your project. Maybe it's a shelf, the top of a box, or the top of a table. The negative will be routed directly into it. Then the positive will be glued into the negative. At the heart of router inlay is the Router Inlay Kit. It comes with a bushing and an 1/8 inch downcut spiral bit. The bushing is installed in the router and is what guides the router along the template. The bushing in a Router Inlay Kit is like any other bushing with one exception. It has a removable spacer ring. By having a removable spacer ring, we can cut both the positive and the negative with the same template. When we cut the negative, we'll leave the spacer ring on. When we cut the positive, we'll remove it. To install the bushing in a Porter cable style router, remove the threaded ring, insert the bushing into the base, and use the threaded ring to secure the bushing. If your router is not Porter cable compatible, more than likely it came with an adapter, or an adapter is available. On my Bosch router, I simply install the Router Inlay Kit into the adapter, and then insert the adapter into the router. The final step in installing the Router Inlay Kit is to install the bit. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, we can get to the fun stuff, routing the positive and the negative. But that brings up a question. Which one do we do first? The positive or the negative? Now technically it doesn't really matter which we do first, but in my experience, there's a few reasons why it's easier to do the positive first. First, we can get the positives cut out and we can place them back onto our project to see if we still like the way they look and decide on its final positioning. So let's get started cutting the positive. Remove the spacer ring from the inlay bushing. I wish I had $1 for every time I forgot this step. Next, we need to set the depth stop on the router. Place both the template and the stock that you're going to use for the inlay on top of the scrap material. Then place the router on top of that, with the bushing just hanging off of the edge. Then plunge the router down until the bit touches the scrap material, and lock this setting into the depth stop. Apply double stick tape to the back of the positive inlay material. Make sure some of the tape overlaps both what will become the positive and the leftover stock. We want to make sure that both parts remain secure as the positive breaks free. And secure the positive material to the scrap material. Apply double stick tape to the back of the router template and adhere it to the positive. You may find that your router template is much bigger than your positive material. In these cases, I'll add spacers to support the router template. And here's a tip. If you don't have precisely the right thickness of spacer, use some playing cards to take up the slack. Alright, we're finally ready to start routing the positive. Place the router on top of the template and make sure the bushing is in contact with the side of the template. Plunge the router into the positive material. Follow the router template in a clockwise direction, making sure that the bushing stays in constant contact with the template. But don't push too hard. We don't want the template to come loose. Place a small pencil mark on the positive so we know which way it's oriented. We don't want to get it upside down or backwards. And voila, there's our positive. Alright, we got our positive cut out. That wasn't so bad. Now we can move along and start working on the negative. Replace the spacer ring onto the router bushing. Now I wish I had another $1 for every time I forgot this step. If your router has a micro adjustment, reduce the depth by about 1/64 of an inch. This will leave the negative slightly shallow and the positive slightly proud after we glue it up. I find that this makes it easier to level the inlay after the glue up. If your router does not have a micro adjustment, follow the same procedures as when we set the depth for the positive. Only this time, place 3 playing cards on top of the scrap material. That will give us our 1/64 of an inch. Next, we'll prepare the negative. Place double stick tape on the back of the negative. And adhere the negative to the scrap material. Apply double stick tape to the back of the template again. And adhere it to the negative. Place the router on top of the template, making sure that the bushing is contacting the template. Then, just like the positive, plunge the bit into the negative material. Follow along the template, being sure to maintain contact at all times. And again, be sure not to press too hard on the template. We don't want it to come loose. This outlines the negative, but unlike the positive, we have one more step on the negative. We need to remove the rest of the stock in the middle. There's several ways we can go about this. I'll cover two of them. We could just hog it out with our current setup, but you'd probably end up with something that looks like this. That's because with the router inlay bushing installed, we're essentially routing blind. What I do in this case is alternate back and forth between using a chisel and clearing it with the router some more, until the bottom of my negative is nice and clean. The second way is to remove the router bushing. This way we won't be routing blind, but we have to be careful. We're going to be freehand routing at this point. What I do in this case is start at the center and work slowly outwards. This minimizes the time you spend dangerously close to the edge. I do this until I have just a thin ring at the end to remove. It's much easier to control the router when you have just a thin line left to remove. Alright, let's take a look at our negative. Here's a tip for removing the double-sided tape. Try rolling the tape off as opposed to pulling it off. I find that this pulls out less fibers from the wood. And voila, there's our negative. Alright, that does it for the negative. So now we got both our positive and our negative. You'll probably find that the positive doesn't quite fit into the negative at this point, and it's probably going to be a little bit snug. That's okay, that's what we want. What we'll do now is adjust the fit. Use a sanding block to refine the edge of the positive, holding the sanding block at a slight angle. That way the edge will be a slight taper. Keep checking the fit as you go. Be careful not to press the positive too hard into the negative. We want to be able to get it back out. When the positive fits about halfway into the negative, we're there. Alright, now that we've got our positive adjusted to fit into the negative, we can go ahead and glue it in. Apply a thin layer of yellow glue to the negative and to the positive. And insert the positive into the negative. Don't worry about pressing it all the way in at this point. The clamps will take care of that. Place a piece of wax paper over the inlay and a caul on top of that. And finally, apply firm, even clamping pressure. Okay, with the help of some video magic and a little bit of music, our glue is dry. Alright, let's take a look. Okay, we're on the home stretch. We have one more small step to do. That is to clean up the glue and to level the inlay. Use whatever you're comfortable with to level the inlay. A block plane, a sanding block, or my favorite, a card scraper. A wipe down with some mineral spirits will give us just a hint as to what it will look like after we apply the finish. And there you have it, a router inlay. Now that was a lot of fun. I hope you had fun as well. And if you add router inlay to your projects, send me some pictures. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, send me an email. I'm Brian Havens. Thanks for watching. Okay, what happened? Oh! On the other hand, as I found out while making this video, there's more than I thought of. On the other hand, there's a lot you can talk about as I found out while.
Why is it funny? So you're saying we'll be right back to hell? I'm saying we'll be right back